Well, here we are, one day after launch. My voice, a little raspy, a little gone, but I think that is a reflection of just how excited I am about this bike and about this flagship being relaunched, the XP4, right? We got rid of the .0, XP 3.0, XP 2.0. We can't be doing 4.0, 7.0, 10.0. It's too much. So XP4, first and foremost, I gotta hear, what do you guys think are the, your biggest upgrade, your most favorite thing that's come to this bike?
My most favorite thing is probably the keyless riding. This has been a feature, from the very first bike that we ever made, the 1.0, folks were like, what, I gotta keep the key in to keep this thing going? What is this, And people, the spare key, a lot of people would just leave their spare key attached to the key that's in the battery, so you'd have a key dangling, and who wants that, so keyless riding, major upgrade.
For me, it's the display.
Yeah.
Where when I first started here, you guys were super fluent in this code cryptic language of like, what settings do I change? And it took a while to figure out. And now it's, for any of our new customers, it's just not even, it's a thing of the past. They won't even realize that that's once how e-bikes were, not just us. So I think that's a huge reflection as to just the progress that gets made from one bike to the next.
Yeah, and on that display, we've added USB-C charging to it. Also, there's some additional viewpoints for it. So if you're a bit of a nerd and data junkie like myself, I love to know, what is my pedaling cadence? How much human power am I putting in? How much, motor power is the bike providing? Like, that is really, interesting information. And now that's available to you through the display, and just being able to cycle through the additional screens, for me, is a just huge leap. And we just skipped several generations, and what I would say is make best in class, a best in class display.
I think the new riding modes are awesome for people, right? I mean, pedal assist, right? On the old display, it said PAS, and you were in, levels 0 through 5. And now it's much more intuitive, where it's off. It's Eco, Tour, Sport, Sport Plus, and Turbo, right? And we have different colors. It looks awesome. It's really intuitive. And we've really spent a lot of time dialing in what those ride modes are, which maybe we can talk a little bit more about later. But, just really nice looking with the colors, the power bar.
The power bar is so great, seeing that go up, and it just brings more color to the screen, right?
Also removable. So now, we've solved the issue. You brought it up yesterday. Sometimes, displays are fragile.
Yep.
Somebody, wrecks their bike, or, UPS decides to shot put the box. Sometimes that display can see some damage. So now it's a removable display, so the mounting mechanism stays on the bike. You just pop that thing off, unplug 2 cables, boom. You can, if you're walking into the grocery store and you're worried about it, you can take it off. But it'll come, uninstalled from the bike. You'll just have to pop it on, and that's a really awesome feature.
Yeah. I think staying up in the cockpit, one of the things that I see as a huge improvement is the brake set, and I know that's something you played a heavy hand in. Why is it that you get on a XP4 compared to a, post run of the hydraulic brake system on a 3.0, and it feels like there's a material difference? What might they be feeling?
When you look at it as a complete system, you have the brake lever right up at the front that you squeeze, you've got the caliper in back, and then you have the rotor. So it's a whole complementing host of different technical changes to get us to where that brake performance is today. So, we mentioned it already, of the thicker rotor, we've got a different caliper, we've got a different master cylinder up at top. It's a whole host, it's an ecosystem of the brake. You can't just look at one isolated component, and that's what we did here.
We listen to customer feedback, we pride ourselves on that. I think we probably say that every design series, but one of the points of feedback from the customer is that original shift lever that has been on so many of our bikes. Not the most intuitive thing in the world, not the easiest thing to operate, and that historically has been paired with the Shimano Tourney 7-speed.
Right.
And so we wanted to up the ante. We heard it from customers. They wanted to see that upgraded. And so we went to the Shimano Altus 8-speed drivetrain. And with that, we also went to the below the bar trigger shifter. It's a much better experience. It's intuitive. A lot of people recognize it from bikes they may have ridden in the past. And, I personally love the below the bar trigger shifter. I know we had some
Yeah.
talks about, hey, there's options here on shifting, but Shimano only makes that below the bar trigger shifter on the right side.
Right.
And so, that leaves us with a dilemma. How do we do a throttle if we have this below the bar trigger shifter?
Yeah.
Where are we going to put it? We can't do the twist throttle on the right side anymore. And so that left us with, and we'd use this throttle on a couple of other bikes, but that left side thumb throttle, it's ergonomic. Some of these thumb throttles on some of the bikes that we ride really don't feel that good. I mean, especially if you're riding for hours and just, throttling, doing some sightseeing, like your thumb can get a little sore, it's out of position, whatever. This one feels really solid under the thumb. And we actually made a change where we changed the spring rate on that thumb throttle because, some of the first samples we got from the supplier, it was like, okay, this feels a little floppy and, kind of difficult to modulate. But, that's something that we're like, hey, let's dial this in so it feels really good under the thumb. You can go halfway, you can go a third of the way and really modulate that power well, and it's just really comfortable.
I think it's one of the biggest quality of life differences someone may experience coming from a older generation XP compared to the XP4 is the new drivetrain setup, that new chainring, because it's been a part of Lectric since that first 1.0. It's like ghost pedaling is just an inherent thing that you will experience, and now this has completely been deleted. And so my understanding is we actually had to get this custom made because there was not an available 56 tooth one sitting out on the market for us for this folding bike. And so, what was that conversation like?
Well, we try and have pretty aggressive specifications for when we're developing a product. There's all different high marks, quality, we sell a lot of bikes, so the supplier has to keep up. There's all these different inputs that have to be taken into consideration.
Yeah.
So they didn't have, one of our suppliers didn't have that available. And we had to go through a tooling process with them. They had to, design something for us, and that's always a fun process and fun thing to do with a supplier. They love it, we love it, and it just took time to perfect, but we did.
For those that don't know, torque sensors versus cadence sensors. Cadence sensors sense if you're pedaling, they turn the motor on or they turn the motor off, that's it. With a torque sensor, the sensor actually feels how hard you're pushing on the pedals and dynamically responds to that input. So if you pedal softly and you're just chilling, it doesn't give you too much power. As soon as you start mashing on those pedals, it's gonna really amp up that power. And so, with the Express, that was our first time doing a torque sensor. Took a lot of iterations going back and forth with the supplier on that to dial that in. And we've just continued, with every product that we've come out with a torque sensor to get better and better with that power delivery.
28 miles per hour, compare that to a 3.0 with a lower cadence on a torque sensor based e-bike compared to a cadence based e-bike. And to me, that's just a massive improvement for the whole bike without really any compromise having to be made. So I think that was excellently done. One of the things that I think I've been overly excited about are these pedals, because we've done a quick release before that doesn't have the spline inserts, and so that connection point, contact point, whatever, there's a material benefit, but it also just feels like this has much better grip or traction or just design and just a better feeling of material. I don't know.
Yeah, when your feet are on there, basically there's pegs built in, if you will. So there's little studs that come up from the pedal, and all pedals have this. This is not unique necessarily to this, but the way that we approach designing those into the pedal is unique to Lectric and unique to this pedal.
The bike just feels higher quality than previous generations. We've been saving some of the best topics though for last. Let's talk a bit about the battery first.
This battery was a ground up redesign.
Yeah.
It is not the same battery as the 3.0, not even close. Because there's a number of things we wanted to do. Number one, we started offering the long range battery on the 3.0, so you had your option. You could get the 10.4 amp hour or the 14 amp hour, and we heard customer feedback, and we're continuing to hear it where it's 14 is still not enough. I've still got range anxiety when I'm out there, and we wanted to pair this with, I won't spoil it too much, but the 750 watt motor.
Right.
In order to get, maximum power out of that 750 watt motor, you actually need a larger battery.
Right.
Right. And so going to 17.5 was instrumental there. or critical there. As well as we wanted to go to fast charging on this bike, right? And so we have had 2 amp chargers basically across the whole lineup. Up until this last holiday season, we came out with the 5 amp fast charger for the Expedition 2 and the XP4. And so with this battery being 17.5 amp hours, 65 cells, you know, 5 amp fast charging just made sense, right? Being able to go from charging that in over 8 hours down to 3.5 hours. I mean, that's just crazy, right? I mean, like, you can go out, ride 90 miles, come back, charge 3.5 hours later, you're back on the road. So 5 amp fast charging, awesome on this product. We moved the charge port. We now have the keyless riding, which I mentioned earlier, so you can lock that battery, take the keys out, you know, and forget about it. So the on-off switch, the charge port, and the key position are all on the 9-drive side of the bike, and that was something that we wanted, you know, when we were designing this battery. If you're gonna have an on-off switch, and this is where we get to nerd out on the details, you want a rocker switch. It's an investment. It's a more expensive switch compared to some of the other, you know, sleep mode switches and stuff that we've looked at in the past. But the rocker switch is awesome. It has the O for open circuit. It has the straight line for a closed circuit when the battery's on. We have a really satisfying new rubber grommet that goes over the charge port and that on-off switch. So, you know, rain or shine, your e-bike's gonna be fine. And yeah, this battery, I can't say enough good things about it. Came out awesome. I'm really jacked for people.
You know, the tubing had to change in order to fit all of those cells. And when the tubing changed, the folding dimensions would change. And so we had to think, all right, how can we solve for this, right? How can we get the folding dimensions down? And that was one of the things that, you know, sparked the conversation of going to the quick release pedals. You know, although we got about an inch taller, we also got about an inch thinner. And so we ended up kind of just washing it all out by making that one small change. And also packaging, Rob, we've been working on this for years, transitioning the whole product lineup.
This is the final product in the lineup that we transitioned from, you know, foam packaging over to eco packaging. So it's pretty much all cardboard in there. And it was a challenge to get the packaging right. You know, we wanted it to be more eco-friendly, recyclable, easily, all of that. But we also, you know, want to reduce damage, right? And there's a lot of, you know, thought and engineering and testing that goes into making sure the packaging is right. And so we actually work with our shipping partners, UPS, test to the ISTA is the name of the association that creates these packaging test standards. We test according to these protocols. So, you know, when the boxes are stacked in the warehouse to when they're in the back of the truck, to getting, you know, pushed out of the back of the truck onto your driveway. You know, there are all sorts of tests that we do. We drop the box a number of times. We compress the box to make sure that it's going to be, you know, arrive to the customer safe, you know, and damage free.